a tendency, and this was my experience. I'm speaking of my experience, but I think it's one that many people have. When they come to the concept of panpsychism, I think it tends to initially take a kind of form where we're like projecting a kind of similar psyche or psychic experience into things of the human being. And so I guess people would call that kind of anthropomorphizing. But I think what I've come to think now is that, and then I think it tends to almost seem a bit atomistic. But instead, I think the way that I tend to think about it now, especially like with the word participation, is that we're all like, everything that looks discrete, and also the experience, even of being an individual, is like caught up in these currents of beings, that are not that easily, you can't actually divide them. So
what do you think panpsychism
I think
means?
It's a description.
But you think it's too atomistic?
No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that I think this was my experience, but I think others share it as well based on our conditioning, that when we come to the idea of panpsychism, we're kind of coming with that tendency to conceive of it in that sort of way. But if you stay with it... Huh?
In an overly human way.
Well, at least human as we understand the human, according to kind of industrialized consciousness, with the just subject-object, no middle voice. But as something that can develop into a different way of conceiving of it. That I think more truthfully, I guess, reflects the reality of participation.
So you don't think panpsychism is representing that reality of participation in as full a way as we could?
Well, I think okay, so to me, when I hear the word panpsychism, well, I think of Plato, and I also think of like the psyche in the world soul as not being like the ultimate thing, but definitely part of kind of like it's partakes of transcendence, but it's like something that it's part of, I guess, the metaphysics of the world,
but not the whole.
But not the whole thing, but definitely like is related to the whole in a very important way. Mm-hmm. But I think when people talk about panpsychism, there's a tendency to talk about little minds everywhere, and I think that's true in some sense, but I think all of like what we call little minds are actually like, it's actually like the more intrinsic aspect of the universe, which is, I guess, experience. Or I don't even know how to describe it really. Like, it's just like pure meaning, or I guess people call them consciousness, or it's kind of hard to describe what it is.
So this little minds notion is what analytic philosophers now call constitutive panpsychism. Okay. That our psyche is constituted or composed of little psyches, and that like all the particles that physics describes have a mental aspect, which is their intrinsic nature, with the physical descriptions and all the applied mathematics of contemporary physics. That's the extrinsic nature of the particle. And so there's a constitutive form of panpsychism, which is actually still pretty reductionistic. A lot of the constitutive panpsychists don't think human consciousness or the human soul has freedom. We're actually determined by the minds, the mental activity going on below us. But there's other forms of panpsychism, though, and I think
that's why I described it as descriptive. Panpsychism is descriptive of something that of reality,
and
like
do you think metaphysics should be explanatory?
What do you mean by that?
Well, if you say panpsychism is descriptive, do you mean it's merely descriptive and that ideally we would want more than a description? Namely, an explanation? Or
Well, I'm saying it doesn't exhaust our understanding of the world. Panpsychism, but people use it as if it totally encompasses everything, which it does in some sense, in the sense that all is in soul, but soul's not all there is.
Sure, and no ism is going to encompass everything.
Yeah, I know, but I guess that's sort of what I discern in the way people speak about it.
But would you say that...
I think maybe one of the issues is a kind of historical amnesia.
Well, we're all struggling to remember the past
as best
we can, but...
I'm just trying to remember it by bringing these, I guess, criticisms in.
Well, okay, you brought up Plato. Plato was a panpsychist, but that wasn't all that populated his universe or that caused the universe that he described. There's more to it.
Yeah.
The soul of the world is not itself the cause of the world.
Yeah.
And so, this is where we need to bring in questions of theism.
Yeah, because, it's...
Pantheism, panentheism, these different ways of getting at God's relationship to the world and to the soul of the world. And, do those beings, does the soul of the world emanate from God? Or
if you're talking about Whitehead, then this is related to the issue where people... the question, does Whitehead's philosophy make sense without God? Some people don't want God, don't feel like it's necessary, but in my opinion, I guess this is one of the reasons why.
Yeah.
Which renders panpsychism as a descriptive, it's descriptive.
Yeah, well, I think science, natural philosophy, these are always going to be descriptive endeavors, right?
Yeah, sure.
So what else could we be doing if not describing?
Well, but to me, when it's like emphasized and it's kind of almost like this master category that people use, then it obscures other things.
Yeah.
And it's, so...
Well, like I think I said yesterday, panpsychism doesn't tell you anything about God, whether God exists, what God's role is.
Yeah.
So we would then need to talk about the theisms, the various ways of theologizing, I guess.
Yeah. The word that I was just trying to come up with earlier was, I think, beingness.
Yeah. And nothingness too, right? I mean, Heidegger and Sartre.
Well, yeah, I wasn't denying nothingness. I just mean that...
well, you should.
When we're talking about, there. Like, kind of that in which minds participate in or partake of, that's what, like, being to me, beingness in the way that I've encountered it in certain thinkers is almost like God's presence. So it's like, has awareness or like, I don't know how to describe it exactly because it exceeds like, my individual human experience and encompasses everything.
So I would say panpsychism is the truth about the cosmos.
Yeah.
It's about cosmology. And,
I agree. Yeah.
But you still need theology and metaphysics to make reference to something beyond the world. And in relationship to the world, or like, what is that relationship? This is, we're already making reference to something beyond the soul of this world. We're talking about the conditions for the possibility and the creation of a soul of this world. And, I guess you're right that there's some panpsychisms, whether it's the analytic panpsychism, or maybe he's a cosmopsychist now, I'm not even sure, but the version of panpsychism that someone like Philip Goff defends, which is constitutive, reductionistic panpsychism, doesn't allow for human free will, as far as I understand.
I just think that's so bizarre. I mean, it's
better than materialism, right?
It is philosophically consistent, I guess. Like with materialism, it still is materialism, I think.
Well, Galen Strawson says panpsychism is materialism. It's the materialization of mind. That's how he thinks of it.
Yeah.
But there's also panpsychisms like Freya Matthews, who has this very sort of anti-Plato, anti-Descartes version of sort of Spinozist monism, where everything partakes of this one mind in a way that doesn't leave you with much opportunity for freedom either, because ultimately it's all just one system.
Yeah.
But she's really big on feeling and relationality, but it's like, I feel like you lose the individual in her scheme. It's worth studying deeply. She's like a brilliant, like, feminist rendering of Spinoza's pantheism. But then we still have these other forms of panpsychism, like Whitehead's.
Yeah.
Which I guess are more panentheist.
Yes. Yeah.
The world is in God, and God is in the world, in the sense that, like, each of the particulars are in God, but God is, or the all, is also in each. So God is in the world is in God. So the soul of the world is sort of just the incarnate God, or God become flesh. There's this, the physics of the world soul is what Schelling referred to this as. It's like God's incorporalization, or I think it's Geistlieblichkeit in German, the becoming body.
Yeah, another mythological image is, the world soul, like in its feminine, image, and as Psyche, and as well as Sophia, I think, in some sense as well.
The Gnostic myth, yeah.
As well as a kind of Neoplatonic, the world is wisdom.
Space
flesh.
In particular is wisdom, right? I mean, space has a womb-like quality, and it's all-containing. And I think, I think panpsychism is so important for physics right now.
Yeah.
Because to see space as radiant wisdom, the darkness of space is the radiance of wisdom, and to see space as the way that beings can relate to each other. Like, the very possibility of relationship is provided by the wisdom of space, just holding everything in this wholeness.
Yeah.
And that's, like, how do we shift from this conception of space-time as just a dead, empty container through which matter vibrates? How do we shift to a sense of it as, like, it's like that's the vital flesh of, the mother, or it's the presence of God's love.
Yeah.
That just provides a space for anything to happen.
I was gonna say.
So that's ensouling space, I think. And if physics lacks that, then it's not fully understanding the nature of space, or space-time, or the quantum void, or whatever, however we want to refer to its various aspects.
Well, yeah, it's really interesting. I'm just reminded of, in this discussion, of the word anthroposophy, and like how that is a
the being.
The being through in which we all participate. And if we stop thinking about space as something that's like outside of us, and also as, it being full of wisdom that we are partaking of, then the human becomes, again, like, not like animals in the sense of following the instinct, and that sort of attuned, like, symphony, I guess, of non-human life, but that the human being achieves something like that in a free way, and that's the wisdom of the of the human being that any human being can actualize. And then it's like this kind of non-bifurcated means of knowing and being united with the world. And through Sophia, or, through the world soul, waking up to that continuity in ourselves. And then letting our, lives be guided by the intuitive, I guess consideration of action. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it feels like waking up to the way that the world is continuously created. It wasn't created once a long time ago. It's still being birthed, right? That the birthing of the world out of itself is ongoing.
Yeah.
And so it's continuously creative, but it's also perpetually perishing, in the sense that, no two moments are the same. The past never repeats itself. The poet Borges, he said, nothing is the same. Every moment is new, but in a way that is eternal. Every moment is new, but in a way that is eternal. And I think that captures the paradox of being like continually creative and perpetually perishing. And that's what Whitehead's trying to describe, right? The presence of the eternal. And that's what the soul is the experience of eternity in time.
Yes.
And the world soul functions as like the mediator, if you want, between heaven and earth, or between the spiritual and the physical, or between God and the world. So we gotta talk about it.
Yeah.
And that's why panpsychism is important, even if it's not the whole story.
Totally. No, I agree. I'm not trying to dismiss it. I was just expressing, because you said that this all was catalyzed by you saying the fire was a being with its own will or agency, and I was like, I don't know if I would put it that way.
Well, the fire is a streaming of energy that we receive. I mean, if we're actually standing in front of it, it's a radiant creation of heat and light, and it streams towards us, and we absorb it, and then thereby feel it. And so, it appears to us as that, but I think we know that it's the expression of a being, just like, we express, and then our intention is somehow transformed into a visible sign for those around us to interpret. The fire is a being that has the visible sign of light and heat to express itself.
Yeah, or like a process of that, like a larger being. By that I mean like, just you could imagine fires like, I don't know, like the world is sick, or the planet is sick, and the fire is like a symptom.
Like a fever?
Yeah. And
or
just
worse,
being
inflammation.
Well, neglect and harm,
Yeah.
The devastation of, soils, and the dryness, and the like overgrowth as well. That's interesting. Because the controlled burns are, intended for a kind of almost like purification so that the lands can continue to live. And it's a sort of like kind of purification by fire is almost like a dying and being reborn, like the phoenix.
Yeah.
And that's been not allowed.
Well, as if we could prevent it. I mean, Heraclitus says the universe is an ever-living fire. I think it's phoenix-like in that way. dying and being reborn. And we can't hold that process back. I guess maybe industrial civilization in various ways tries to retard the inevitable, and so only enhances its return. Like,
it's so severed from like time that it just wants to like fix all the
cycles of nature. Yeah,
that are acutely, bothering it.
We thought for like 50 years there, the Great Acceleration, right, in the 20th century after the Second World War, we thought like, okay, we're going to industrialize the earth, take control of nature, and everything's going to be great. And it turns out Gaia is far wiser and more ancient and complicated and deep than mechanistic science imagined. And so now we're like Mickey Mouse after the sorcerer left, and we played with some spells and unleashed the rage of Gaia.
Yeah.
And now there's a lot of blowback, as I think Latour refers to it as like Gaia's, Lovelock says Gaia's revenge, but Latour says it's blowback from our own agency or our presumed...
It's us.
Attempt to control. Yeah.
Yeah. We're meeting ourselves.
Yeah.
Like the after effects.
Yeah.
Well, and I shouldn't, I guess, include everybody in that,
No, there's disproportionately distributed responsibility for different aspects of this crisis, like CO2 in the atmosphere. And
I was listening to, Democracy Now! She had 3 people on speaking about the climate report that came out today, and a man from Bangladesh was saying that he was like, the U.S. and China just need to drop the greenhouse gas emissions, and everyone else will follow. I was kind of like heartened hearing that, not because I feel like, I feel like it seems, I don't know how likely it is that will happen, but just the fact that, that it would potentially create a kind of ripple effect. Mm-hmm. God, I just hope this happens. We really have to act, I think.
Well, it's like, if we wanted to act, I think we'd have to accept that there's no profit to be made in it for either of us or for any individual, because...
Exactly, yeah.
Right now, given the current geopolitical power struggles and the economic relationship that is sort of bridging over that somehow, the U.S., if we were to turn everything over to solar and wind, we'd have to buy all those solar panels and a lot of that technology from China, who's going to be manufacturing it in plants that are powered by coal, that are polluting, that are pouring so much carbon into the atmosphere that the solar panels actually are a net loss in terms of carbon kept out because of the atmosphere, just because of the manufacturing process. And so we need to find a way, not only switching to renewable energy technologies, but producing those technologies in a way that is socially just, like paying the workers enough, and ecologically just, like we can't be paying China lower manufacturing fees to make solar panels cheaply when that's making the climate catastrophe worse.
Yeah, it just really shows how...
we need to cooperate,
that this is transpiring during a time of, there's just so many conflicts among peoples of different nations, and just so many different world experiences and beliefs, and just... Gosh.
We're in dire need of, I think, sources of communion, like things that can help us feel together and have compassion for each other. And
this scientist that I was speaking about from Bangladesh said that he thought that during COVID, during the pandemic, since the pandemic has been transpiring, that we crossed a threshold in the climate crisis, that we're now officially, in this time where it is, well, the disasters are everywhere. And
so like I said, I feel like we need sources of communion and opportunities to come together, to become sensitive to what's transpiring, even if it's too late to prevent the worst of it. We've crossed that threshold.
Yeah.
We need, and I think, yesterday we just did this watershed tour and a witnessing of how water arises out of the rocks and the mountains beneath San Francisco and out of springs and pours down through creeks to the ocean. And I feel like it was something like that as a ritual of lament could be a way of
it doesn't just have to be about lament,
communing.
Though.
Well, I think there's a lot to feel remorse about, though, and to mourn, given the state of
but it's also about
life-giving waters and all of the places that have been so destroyed by the incursion of industrial mentality.
Of course, but I just think that it's a little one-sided. I think we'd also need to frame it as something that is productive of wonder and intimacy and self-knowledge, and it's just not, I don't know. I think it should be framed without emphasizing one emotional experience over another, because it's also ideally not just going to happen in that day, right? That kind of relationship continues to be cultivated, and I don't think you can always, it might not really, not everyone would feel that immediately, and to frame it that way, emphasizing that, I think could nip the potential for someone to eventually feel that by almost, I don't know, I think it can be a bit alienating, or somebody will tear it apart in their mind with their skepticism.
I guess, but for me, just hearing the story of the last few hundred years, seeing the map from the creeks that were here,
your education, not everybody thinks the way that you do.
Well, I guess this is in addition to being a ritual of lament. I agree. It also has a positive educational element.
It does.
And it's not going to all happen in one visit necessarily, but I don't disagree with what you're saying. But I also think people are capable of just learning a story that they've just never been told before about the place that they live.
Yeah.
And witnessing the water arise out of the earth and flow downhill and seeing how fragile that process is, and seeing, there's a sense in which I imagine, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people experiencing a sense of outrage, like something was taken from them, that they weren't told this or shown this. I think that outrage has to be directed at someone in particular. I think it's outrage at the collective irresponsibility that has allowed a story of the watershed.
Yeah, but I think
have been known.
Lament is the primary character experience that people talk about, but I don't I think it's what characterizes the whole myth of the fall that is behind a lot of the discourse and feeling. But I just wonder if it's a bit one-sided to emphasize that, and to also think that it's going to motivate people.
I didn't say it would motivate them. I thought it would just make them sensitive to the places that they live and allow for at least the beginning of a renewed relationship with the living earth. That's basically what I was trying to say. And I don't think that lament or mourning is the only experience that one could or should have from doing a watershed tour, but I do think it's one of the possibilities. And
sure.
I also think, it's educational, and I think there are a lot of people who will have a totally different reaction and probably would never even go on a tour like that in the first place. But, it was just an example I thought of in the context of the discussion about panpsychism. And, if the earth is alive and has an interior dimension, a depth dimension, I don't even like the word dimension, it's too geometrical. If the earth has interiority, then how are we going to enter into relationship with that interiority? And witnessing water arising out of the rocks is one way of touching and being touched by whatever the life of the earth might be. I mean, it's when you first hear about that notion, it's so big. It's like, what? Where's that? I just see dirt, But springs, I mean, that's like, what's doing that?
Yeah, it is. It was amazing. I loved the wet spots. Like, I liked the wet spots the most, like, that were just very modest, like the little bubbling little waterfall in the woods.
The seeps?
Yeah, well, the seeps, but also that wasn't a seep, that was a spring. But it was so subtle.
Yeah.
Yeah, it may not have been subtle in the past, I don't know. The springs and hot springs are amazing. I love hot springs. Like, just the way that they've designed their park around it. So cool. The fountains and... I love that place.
Which place are you talking about?
Hot Springs in Arkansas.
Oh.
You remember that?
Yeah. I'm just giving context to the folks listening.
Yeah.
Well, I think the world's waiting for us to pay more attention.
I think so too.
All the beings that inhabit this world with us are waiting for us to pay more attention. And so, may they be seen and heard.